Hello, everyone, and a warm welcome to all of you on this session, which is a holistic approach to employee well-being in India. My name is Rishi, and I'm part of Accenture, and I drive what we refer to as talent strategy internally. And in this specific role, I'm responsible for the employee well-being, what we call as an umbrella initiative under Truly Human, to promote innovative thinking and agility in mindset. And I believe as far as the topic is concerned of employee well-being, it has gained momentum in recent years. What actually started off as just about a single dimensional view of what are the physical aspects that we have to take care of has now morphed itself, and it has lent itself to a different kind of interpretation. Now, in order to kickstart the proceedings, I would also like to introduce the two panelists that we have they represent firms who do some very progressive and superlative work around emotional well-being, around employee well-being. And I would like to introduce first Sakshi Handa is one of our panelists. She's the HR head for supply chain South Asia for Unilever. She is responsible for leading and shaping the HR agenda for roughly around 1,700 employees. And she's also a member of supply chain leadership team and the HR leadership team. And she provides end-to-end HR support through active business partnering and leading a team of HR professionals. Interestingly, Sakshi also leads the robust well-being agenda for Unilever South Asia. So that's Sakshi for you.
Hi. Thanks for the introduction, Rishi.
Thanks, Sakshi, and welcome to the forum.
My pleasure.
Our other panelist this afternoon is Sudeep. And Sudeep is part of GSK. He's the country HR head for GSK Consumer Healthcare in India. Sudeep is an HR leader with over 16 years of experience across different industries, IT, BPO, and FMCG. And in his role as HR head, Sudeep has played a wide variety of roles. And his key role right now is to drive the health and well-being agenda for GSK, consumer health employees, including both pan-India and really certain customized initiatives as well. So Sudeep, welcome to the forum.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Great. All right. So I think what we will do is that we will have a couple of, I would say, themes on which we will elicit responses from both Sakshi and Sudeep. And I will request all the participants to keep the questions and hold on to the questions right till the end. We have budgeted time for question and answers as well. And once we get to the end of the session, I think we'll devote 15 minutes to ask our experts here on the topic of employee well-being in India. So just to get kick-started, I would like to just ask some questions, and maybe I'll come to each one of you after that, Sudeep and Sakshi. The question is, how does your organization define employee well-being? So that's the first part of it. The second is, why would it make really, I would say, why is it really gaining importance? Or why is it that over the last couple of years, we see a huge amount of momentum of companies focusing on employee well-being? So I think we can start with Sakshi, you, and then we can come to Sudeep.
Sure. Thanks, Rishi. I'll answer your first question first. So sure. How does our company define well-being? Unilever looks at well-being as a holistic approach. You know, they look at well-being in all possible dimensions, all possible aspects, starting with physical well-being. You know, your physical state of being. You know, you should be healthy, you should be eating good, you should be feeling healthy, you should be feeling happy. That's the first part. Then, you know, looking at the second dimension, which is mental well-being, you should be in a stable state of mind. You know, you should bring your 100% to work. You should be free of all sorts of mental worries and shackles at work. And therefore, you should be able to give your 100% when you are in your organization. The third aspect is emotional well-being. And, you know, this is often underplayed in organizations. But the way we look at it, we think it's a very, very important part of a person's personality. You know, whether the person is at work or at home, they need to be emotionally stable. And, you know, it's a big, big contributor in actually, you know, a success of a person if well taken care of. And the fourth dimension, which is very dear to my heart personally, is purposeful well-being, which is really about seeking bigger meaning, going above your job, going above your daily responsibilities, being a more holistic person who reaches out and gives out to the society at large, who does things beyond themselves and brings their true purpose to work. That's the way we define well-being. So very clearly, there are four pillars. There's physical, there's mental, there's emotional, and there's purposeful. There's also a fifth leg, which has recently gotten added, and that is about financial well-being. And we are very consciously looking at financial well-being as another important aspect of a holistic well-being approach. And maybe we can talk about that a little later. But yes, so we do look at, a 360-degree approach to well-being in that sense. To answer your second question on why this is gaining importance now, my answer would be there is never a good or a bad time to look at well-being. Actually, it should be looked at right from the beginning, right from the time the employee joins the organization. It's like a full employee life cycle in that sense. And Unilever as an organization has always looked at well-being. Maybe they didn't spell it out so clearly, a decade ago or something. But currently, the philosophy is very clearly that if you want employees to give their 100% to work, if you want to become the big, audacious, if you want to achieve your big, audacious goals, your growth goals, you need to have committed employees, healthy employees, happy employees. And if your employees are not healthy and happy, they will definitely not be productive. So that's the thought process.
Excellent. I think that's really music to ears about how Unilever is approaching the entire concept of employee well-being. So thanks a lot, Sakshi. We'll really go on to Sudeep now and maybe take his point of view on how does GSK really conceptualizes and looks at employee well-being, and obviously about how does really the concept gains its momentum in the last couple of years in India.
Sure. So I think for GSK, it's kind of inherent in our mission. Our mission is about helping people do more, feel better, and live longer, right? And that's what we describe as a mission as we reach out to millions of patients and consumers all over the world. So very simply put, we apply the same mission internally as well. And that's why for GSK, employee health and well-being has been a pretty much integral part of our business and people strategy for quite a while. So it's not something new. But I think what we have seen definitely is from an employee point of view, a lot more interest in this area than there has been at any time before. And obviously there are plenty of factors that contribute to that. The workplace is changing, the world is changing. There's obviously increased stress upon employees in many ways, right? And across all our people everywhere. Also, if you think about it, the work-life integration is at an all-time high. The earlier compartmentalization that people used to have between work and life has gone away. And therefore, from a workplace, employees pretty much expect the same fulfillment of needs that they would expect from life overall, which would include not just basic hygiene needs of living, but whether it be social, emotional, or health needs. So I think even from an HR point of view, we used to focus a lot more on the social aspect a little while ago, and traditional quote-unquote engagement programs would focus on that. But I think as you address the changing demographic, as you address the changing needs of our workforce, the health and well-being agenda is becoming quite central to HR strategy. I think not just in GSK, but like I said, it's been embedded for a long time. But I think I see it across industries, across companies, everywhere.
Great. I think that makes perfect sense. And maybe I think while both of you have answered this question in some bit and in some part, but I'm just trying to relate, because I think most of the initiatives that we try and drive in an enterprise are always aligned to the kind of business goals that we want to achieve. Yeah. In your view, and I'm maybe coming to you first, Sudeep, because you just answered this question, and then I'll move on to Sakshi. How do you think that it makes a good business case for really investing in employee well-being? And how do you really create or craft because what the intent of asking this question is that while there are certain progressive organizations out there who would have had defined well-being, the employee well-being agenda is fairly well defined. But I'm also mindful of the fact that there could be some of our viewers today on this panel who are watching this, and if they want to really start off something, how do they actually go about making a business case out of it? Because it is important that the business understands that employee well-being is crucial for the enterprise's success.
Yeah, I think a couple of things. One, from a purely GSK point of view, like I said, it's embedded in our business goals. As a healthcare organization, if our mission is to make people, like I said, help people do more, feel better, live longer, it just makes sense to apply it internally as well. But I think that would hold true across industries and across organizations too, because the expectations from the workforce are changing, and therein lies your business case. I mean, I'll give you an example. The GSK, we roll out these surveys like most other organizations do, and we roll them out annually or 6 monthly on a regular basis, right? And one of the questions that has assumed a lot more importance now, as opposed to earlier, is a question specifically on health and well-being. And it is an important part of our engagement strategy. And thankfully, that's a question which we have constantly got rated high on, and our employees believe that GSK does a lot to kind of do that. But if there are pockets, and there are, where the scores are not that high, it's important that we listen to them and do something about it. Because like I said, employees are no longer looking at their workplace to just satisfy one specific pocket of their needs. They are looking at organizations to satisfy a multitude of needs. And I think if the other parts of those needs are not met, whether it be emotional needs or needs around health and well-being, then we will see the impact on engagement, and to Sakshi's point earlier, on productivity and attrition as well. So I mean, to me, that's a very logical business case to include it. The second thing that I think would help any organization that is starting out on its journey is that, unlike a lot of other things, honestly, health and well-being does not require that much of initial monetary investment all the time, right? There are a lot of low-hanging fruits that you can take up. What it requires, though, is intent. If the intent is right, and if people are committed, the leadership and the HR teams are committed, then there's a lot that can be done. You don't necessarily need to scale up your monetary investment, at least not initially, as you're trying to start on this agenda. So that would be my advice from that point as well.
Well, thanks a lot. I think that's wonderful to hear. And Sakshi, over to you. I think you've already articulated, but just to reiterate the business case, I think that will be helpful.
Right. Thanks, Rishi. I think it's a very relevant question. And I think Sudeep also answered it very, very to the point. The business case is actually very simple and very direct. Unilever is changing. It's growing rapidly. So the jobs are actually getting bigger and bigger by the day. And the teams, contrary to the jobs, are actually getting smaller and smaller, because we are looking at optimizing our efficiencies. So we are in a scenario where the company is growing rapidly. The KPIs are extremely ambitious. The team sizes are getting smaller. There is a matrix organization. You have multiple bosses that you report to, your direct line boss, your indirect line boss, a gentleman sitting in England looking at your goals, all sorts of things. You have a matrix organization that you need to manage. There are workplace pressures. There are all sorts of pressures that come with a high growth organization. And in such a scenario, you have your set of people, your set of employees who are very much at the center of your business. They are grappling, with their own sort of issues, and and these issues are actually common to everybody, to the entire workforce across industries. Lifestyle diseases are increasing rapidly. You do have chronic ailments, blood pressure. You have heart diseases, all sorts of ailments which are actually creeping into our workforce because of the lifestyle that we're leading. So in the middle of high growth agenda, you have these challenges of lifestyle diseases, of an aging population, of the actual work span or the work life, the retirement ages. I mean, hardly anybody in this day and age retires at 60. You see people actually leaving the workforce much, much earlier. So you do have those sort of external pressures and challenges as well. And the result of this entire concoction that I just spoke about is a perfect recipe for employee burnout. Now, you can't be a high growth organization with an employee burnout staring at you in the face. It's just completely opposite to where you want to be. And therefore, the business case is very clear. You need to have employees who are energetic, who are physically, mentally, emotionally stable and are out there to give their best. And of course, well-being, I agree with Sudeep that it's not a very, it's a low-hanging fruit in that sense. You don't need too much of monetary investment in doing something like this. What you definitely need is leadership commitment. And we have that on board. We have it on, we absolutely measure it. So we also have an engagement survey in which we actually call this out as one of the engagement dimensions. And we track our progress on it year on year. This is absolutely a non-negotiable for us. Our employees must feel that they were taken care of. They must feel that their well-being is important. And the movement on that particular dimension of engagement must only go up. So that's the way we look at it.
Great. Thanks a lot, Sakshi. Thanks for the response. And I think we'll shift tracks here a little bit, and we will now look at how exactly has the evolution of employee well-being happened in the last couple of years. And I remember maybe about a decade ago or so, we had heard, and maybe Sudeep and Sakshi, even you will remember the earlier days when we heard about things like work-life balance. And that seemed like a great idea that, somewhere you have work and then you have life and you have to balance it out. And we had a lot of imageries in our mind going around work-life balance. And then we also talked about flexible working. But I think now the approach has again moved quite a bit to an employee's physical, emotional well-being as well. And I would really want to pick your thoughts on Sakshi first, you, and then Sudeep. See, as far as flexible work arrangements are concerned, there seemed to be a stereotype that it is mostly for women employees and for returning mothers, so that there could be some kind of a flexibility that can be provided, and maybe that will also help us to assimilate them back into the workforce. Some kind of a notion around it. But now we are seeing an increasingly a trend, a complete shift where one is looking at flexible working arrangements. Now, I understand that Unilever has got a fantastic policy around it, which is very progressive and industry leading. So would you really want to share some insights on that, Sakshi? That will be very helpful for us here.
Sure. So Rishi, actually, to answer what you said, you started by saying that of late this has become of importance or whatever. I just want to, bring a fact there. The concept of holistic well-being and, agility and flexibility and actually taking care of all dimensions is not new to India. Okay, as a culture and as a society, we've always believed, if you go back to our scriptures, they talk about holistic well-being. They talk about physical, mental equilibrium. Yoga is something that started from India, and it's not about physical posturing only. It's very much a state of equilibrium between mind and body. So, it's actually very deeply ingrained in our culture, I would say. And Unilever has taken cognizance of this very early on. We do have very, very employee-centric policies, whether it's around flexi working, agile working, everything is absolutely open to men as well as women. So there are no women-only policies. All our policies are open for all our employees because, again, we feel that well-being is for everyone and not just a section of our population. Absolutely. So, even things like our daycare facility, we were one of the first organizations which actually opened an in-house daycare center for all employees. And trust me, the men are actually, the statistics are out there to prove it. Came in Times of India front page as well, that nowadays you actually have more male employees, availing these services like daycare and all, than female employees. And that's absolutely the case here as well. So we've opened it to all our employees, agile working, working from home, flexi working, sitting out of another country. So we've had a couple of female managers who were really, really good performers, and we were at a risk of losing them. They would have left the organization if we wouldn't have come up with solutions like this. So it's actually a lot of business. It makes a lot of business sense as well, because we all know that at some point in time we need to trail our families. So if my husband is posted, for 6 months in another country, or for a year in another country, why can't I give my female manager the option of operating from that country as long as she manages her work? So that is the thought process that is really at the center of this. everything that we do, all our well-being initiatives, in the space of, I spoke about financial well-being, we've actually looked at not just male or female population, we've also looked at demographically, which is the population which needs support. So while there are these young mothers and young parents who need support in terms of policies like maternity benefit 6 months or paternity leave of 15 days or whatever, we also have an aging population that we need to take care of, which needs to plan for its retirement before it's too late. So for that population, we have a lot of counseling around financial well-being, when to invest, how to invest, where to invest, and things like that. So I would say that you need to basically take care of your population in every segment, whether it's male or female, whether it's young population or demographically the older population. But that is the way Unilever looks at it.
Great. And I think there could be certain level, and I'm sure that the study would have also shown a lot of, I would say, it would have given us a lot of pointers on what those primary drivers could be. Like, for example, for instance, if I just called out those two categories because I think that's where traditionally companies have focused on. But what are the other things that you see as a pattern because of which that becomes a driver for having a flexible work arrangement?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, the demographic, the employee demographic is an important factor. And you need to take care of it because, you have a workforce which is a mix of Gen X and Gen Y and the future millennials and all of that.
Right.
So the concerns of Gen X and or rather the millennials is all about flexibility. As an employee group, that is what they seek. They seek flexibility, they seek variety and options, and that's what we provide in a lot of dimensions. For example, we as we talk, we're running a MasterChef competition with healthy ingredients, and we are a foods company as well. So we do have brands like Knorr, etc. And we, promote these sort of competition and young employees to actually participate in such things to build awareness about, say, healthy food practices. At the same time, you have a bunch of employees sitting in a factory who may be much older and may need more traditional means of communication. So,
right.
You reach out to them in a different way. So I think demographics do play a very, very important role in determining what you offer to whom. And, one very, very, again, very relevant example is that we've just introduced very recently an elder care policy. So for population, your middle and high level managers, their stress factors or their triggers are very different from the younger population. Right. Stress to them comes from the fact that they need to take care of aging parents, for example. Okay. So how do you provide them support on that? We've actually, had a tie-up with a couple of organizations which provide professional elder care support. So our parents are taken care of. For the younger lot, they're more concerned about how their kids are taken care of, and which is where we have daycare and school tie-ups and those sort of facilities.
Great. I think, Sakshi, that was very insightful. Thank you so much. Sudeep, over to you on these two parts. If you want, I can repeat those questions.
Yeah,
those two parts.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right. So what I really want to understand in terms of flexible work arrangements and how does really GSK promote for its entire population set, entire employee population. And the other one was obviously, what are some of the drivers for making sure that you are actually required to have a flexible approach towards working?
Yeah, I'll address the second part first, because to me, I think, like you said, it's no longer about, it's no longer about approaching flexible work arrangements as a standalone agenda anymore. To what Sakshi was saying, the landscape internally and externally has changed so much that you can't avoid having a flexible working arrangement in most organizations today, right? I've worked with, worked with Accenture, and I've worked with previous IT and BPO firms, and I'm working with an FMCG, and I see the scenarios being the same. You've got matrixed organizations, you've got organizations which are virtually linked, you've got sessions that sometimes last till evening, you've got early morning meetings sometimes. It's kind of, all over the place. And I think it just become very inherent. So till about 10 years ago, this was a buzzword in HR. flexible work policy and, all of that stuff. And like you said, it was earlier targeted more at women employees and so on. But I think now over a period of time, the way we are a lot more global, well-networked, virtually connected organization. I think flexible working has just become part of daily working. And you don't necessarily, while I think all organizations do have policies around it, but you don't necessarily need a standalone initiative around it anymore. I mean, it is really just part of day-to-day working. And I think that's what GSK does. I mean, some of the examples that Sakshi shared just resonates a lot with me because that's the kind of arrangements we've made for people and so on. And other policies then start sort of feeding into it, right? So like last year in April, we said, how do we relook at our, leave policy for new parents and make it a lot more inclusive and make it a lot more flexible for people? And said, much earlier than what the government or anyone else was dictating, we said, we'll make it 6 months. But at the same time, we thought about the different parts of our population and different demographics. So we said, for example, if a single man wants to adopt and has a baby, then are we not going to give him that same accommodation and privilege? Well, we are, right? So it's going to be 6 months for that individual as well. So to my mind, that's really what the right mindset is about. So I think flexible work arrangements, I think, was a highly misused term for quite a while. And it was being approached more like a policy. But today, I see it being practiced in spirit in a lot of organizations today than just in letter. So that's my take on that.
Well, thank you, both of you. I think that was wonderful about at least getting the flexible work arrangement and the construct around it. I'll just shift track a little bit just to get a sense of what's happening around the physical well-being, because as Sakshi called out earlier, that it is physical, emotional, mental, and possibly financial as well. I think that's pretty much the holistic approach that she spoke about. But I'm quite curious, and maybe the first question, therefore, this question, obviously, Sudeep, I will want you to take up first, which is on what is the approach that we have as far as GSK is concerned on the physical well-being, given that it's a healthcare company. Yeah. So how do you really create that impact, that positive impact of talking about the physical well-being and instilling that sense of value in your employees?
Okay. Sorry, I'm coughing a little bit, but this is clearly my Gurgaon roots, and everyone knows what's happening here. That's clearly coming to the fore. So you're absolutely right. I mean, physical well-being is obviously the crux, and like Sakshi said, one normally starts there. I think from a GSK point of view, there are some basics, right? So, for example, having the right kind of well-designed facilities that encourage movement, signages that encourage movement, making sure that you're making sure that. For example, most of our facilities, in fact, all our facilities would be smoke-free. Because we have the products available, a lot of our facilities offer smoking cessation services and products as well. Most of our large sites and large offices have healthy nutrition labels on food being offered and so on. So constant reminder to employees around nutrition too. So I think these are some of the basic hygiene factors. And like I said, that's why I said, I think a lot of investment in this is not necessarily monetary to start with, at least, but it is really low-hanging fruit, right? And this is the kind of stuff that we have done across GSK globally, not just in India, which is some of the basics. But I think over the last few years, we've also seen some of the more initiatives coming through, which got a very, very positive response. So, for example, we offer a program called Partnership for Prevention, which is really 40 preventive healthcare services offered free to all our employees and their dependents, across the world, across GSK, and we rolled it out in India as well, pretty much ahead of the world. I mean, huge, extremely positive response to that. I mean, just in the last 1 year alone, we had about, I think, 9,300 services being utilized, right? Which is really, really positive. So that's the kind of impact, and that's the kind of preventive healthcare which really goes back to the way GSK thinks and why, like I said, it's embedded in our mission and how we want to do things. And then, of course, there are things that you constantly do to bring attention on the well-being and the physical health agenda as much as you can. So we are running, for example, a global challenge in collaboration with the Virgin Group around Pulse and about keeping healthy and about walking and stuff like that, and making it pretty exciting and so on. And we have more than 1,000 employees from India actually participating. And it's really great to know that out of the top 10 spots held worldwide, nearly half of them from India. So clearly, India is becoming a lot more health conscious. And to your earlier point, that is really front and center of not just an organization's agenda, but an employee's agenda as well. The fact that such initiatives, which I think if we were to be rolling them out 10, 15 years earlier, they wouldn't get this kind of response that they're going now.
Absolutely.
So, I think that's really, in my mind, the consolidated view on physical well-being and health that we are driving.
Great. Thanks a lot, Sudeep. Very insightful. Sakshi, do you just want to do a quick 30-second roundup on that? I know you've spoken about it earlier, but if you could just summarize the approach specific to physical well-being, that would be helpful.
Sure, Rishi. So physical well-being, of course, is the starting point. Unless you're physically healthy, you cannot be at your workplace. And Unilever enables it in two ways, looking at the hardware side of it and the software side of it. The hardware side of it is really around our Lamplighter medical health program. We have a program in which all employees undergo a complete medical examination once in 2 to 3 years. And above 35 years of age, it's once a year. So, this helps us in early detection of any sort of big chronic ailments that are creeping in, and we can start treating them early on. That's the whole, importance and significance of the Lamplighter. And we actually do mark out, on the basis of the results of the medical examination, we do actually mark out the red and the amber cases, people who are very, very susceptible to ailments, blood pressure. Right. And we actually make customized health plans for all those employees, irrespective of what the number is. Typically, this is about 20% of your population. So, it's good to catch them early. It's good to put them on a health improvement plan, a physical health improvement plan, and follow it up. So the doctors actually monitor the progress against the KPIs for each of these red and amber people that we identify. And this is only for their own, benefits. So you do see a lot of traction and a lot of reciprocation from the employee side as well. So that is around the hardware part of it. The software part of it is around communication and awareness. So we do run a lot of workshops across our branches, sales branches, factories, locations, 30, 35 locations that we have across South Asia about healthy cooking, healthy eating. There's a lot of emphasis and a conscious shift towards making the source healthy. If you eat healthy, all the other outputs and your parameters and your metrics, health metrics will be an outcome of that. So you improve the input and the output will be taken care of. That is the philosophy. There are also challenges that we run. So I could relate to what Sudeep was saying. We are, a lot of our brands actually stand for health, So we have Brook Bond, we have Lipton, green tea, we have green tea. So a lot of our competitions, actually, challenges that we run for all employees are actually sponsored by our own brands, because that's what the brand stands for. And this is the best way of actually bringing the brand to life by running out a competition for what it stands for. So we did have a very interesting weight loss challenge. We had a very interesting habit change challenge that we had run recently for teams, not just for individuals. So a team of, so for example, my HR team participated and they said that we're going to bring healthy potluck, or healthy food from home for this entire month instead of eating in the canteen or whatever. So,
absolutely.
So that's the software part of it. But we do look at it in totality in the hardware and the software side of it.
Well, thank you very much, Sakshi. I think that's pretty holistic in nature. I guess this is one part which has not been dealt with in as much of detail as possibly some of the companies are attempting to do it now. And I can reflect from my experience of running Truly Human, what we call Truly Human as an approach to employee well-being, which is around the emotional well-being. So we do see a lot of stress these days. The stress is on the rise. And I think Sudeep did allude to that in the initial part of the conversation. The mental stress, the kind of blurring of boundaries between work and life, right? The kind of travel, the kind of other stress, the stress of itself of being somewhere in a structure which you don't understand very readily, right? So those kinds of factors could induce that. So Sudeep, coming to you specifically, what does GSK do in terms of focusing on the emotional well-being of employees?
I think before I get into initiatives, etc., I think first of all, it's first an acknowledgement that emotional well-being is important. And like I said, whether it be measurement through survey, whether it be reiteration through programs that we would roll out for our leadership and managers, just the acknowledgement that when you are thinking about people and when you're thinking about driving the people agenda, it's not just about blindly driving improved performance and productivity, but a huge enabler of that is really focusing on health and well-being. And the word that Sakshi used earlier, I'm going to pick that up again and talk about holistic well-being. Right? It's you can't necessarily separate it out and say that I'm going to focus only on physical or mental or emotional or whatever and stuff like that. To us, it's pretty combined. So there's a lot of physical stuff, more focused on health that we do, which I spoke about earlier. But I think beyond that, we run programs we literally have a large suite of programs which are training oriented. Some are classrooms, some are virtual, some are online, which focus on different aspects of health and resilience. They are individuals, sometimes they are for leaders, sometimes they are for people managers, sometimes teams can go together. And different markets then pick up from that suite of programs on what works for them. So for example, in India, we've been running a program called Energy for Performance. And it's been tremendously successful. I mean, I was surprised when I joined and I realized that that's one program which actually has a long waiting list of people and people signing up for it and waiting for it to kind of get nominated for it and go through that 3-day program, which is pretty transformational in nature. Then you've got other programs, which are, like I said, for example, something around managing for resilience and saying that in stressful times, how do you maintain sort of emotional equilibrium over a period of time, not just for yourself, but for the world and the environment around you. And that's kind of an online stroke virtual program that we have to offer people. So these are some ongoing stuff and a suite of products that we have for different markets to pick up on. And then in addition to that, you kind of do different things depending on what the need of a particular location might be. So for example, in head office, which is pretty much the center of the maelstrom when it comes to driving performance, etc., we done a program called Wellness Connection. And we ran a series of sessions on every Friday for consecutive 6 weeks and got a fabulous response. We had half of our head office population across functions turning up. And each session had a different theme. One was focused on, say, on holistic sort of healing and talking about alternative therapies. One was talking about women's health, for example, and talking about that. And each session had a different theme and talking about it. Similarly, in the sites, and we need to focus on that because we are part of the community outreach as well. But if you look at our sites, we ran programs called Brand New You, which was really, again, about looking at physical, mental, talking a combination of yoga, health, cooking, all of that stuff put together and saying, how do you really transform yourself as an individual? And that was a much more simplified version that we ran for our manufacturing sites. Again, got tremendously positive feedback from employees. I think employees are a little tired of traditional engagement activities that HR used to conduct earlier. This is a lot more responsive to their, I think, comprehensive needs. And we've got a lot of success in rolling out a lot of these programs too.
Thanks, Sudeep. That's a wonderful. And I think in the course of our discussion, once we get onto the Q&As, we do anticipate a lot of questions around these themes. So if you all could just gather your thoughts around that as well, because it's coming up in the next 10-15 minutes from now. Okay. Over to you, Sakshi, on the emotional well-being. I think that's something that we wanted to hear, and you had alluded to that in the initial part of our conversation, but I would just want you to elaborate that a little bit here.
Sure, Rishi. So emotional well-being, again, a very important aspect, very much linked to the mental well-being as well, because, your mental state of affairs and your emotional well-being also actually go hand in hand. But really, we take it very, very seriously. We have a counselor sitting in office, and we do realize that, with our sort of lifestyle and our sort of changing job needs and high pressure environments, the pressure cooker environment that we operate in, we try not to make it pressure cooker, but it really depends on the resilience of the employees as well. So resilience has actually come up in a big way, and we try to get people back on track as soon as possible. There is a counseling service in office. We have a counseling helpline. It's a toll-free 1800 sort of a number. We call it Reach Out. It's in 7 languages, 24/7 helpline that we have with professionally trained counselors on the other side who are listening to you with a very unbiased ear and provide you with the actual counseling, varying from personal and professional areas.
Right. So this is something which is which lies outside the boundary, which means the ones who run this kind of a service, which is on calling a number, a toll-free number, and maybe speaking to the individual. I'm assuming that this is not which lies within the Unilever boundary.
So it's a corporate tie-up, Rishi. It's a corporate tie-up which we have with a global healthcare provider. They have professionally trained counselors, and it's a sort of a benefit that we offer to our employees, that they can call up at any time and get proper sort of counseling from these trained counselors, absolutely free of cost. And the extent of this, the benefit of this counseling service has been immense. We have been able to save 2 lives. So there were people who were calling up with suicidal tendencies. And, a lot of these things do happen, starting from work. Sometimes, the concoction between your work pressures and your home pressure, the kind of pressure you have from your children, and all of that just gets too much on certain employees. So we've been able to save lives because of this. We've been able to save people from falling into severe depression because of this sort of a helpline. We call it employee assistance program. And it's very, very, beneficial in India. We've already seen about 850 calls this year. And these are unique employees who've called up to, discuss their personal and professional problems. And we're rolling it out in all the other South Asia countries as well. So we're rolling it out in Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Nepal, everywhere.
Right.
That's one part. The other part, of course, is around, creating more and more awareness that your emotional and your mental well-being is important. Don't hush it up. Don't brush it under the carpet. It's absolutely okay to talk about it. So, for our population, which is sitting in factories and is not very savvy, we can't reach them out physically. And, they don't have a physical counselor sitting in the site. We try to bring about awareness through street plays. So we had the World Mental Health Day activation very recently, where we actually carried out street plays in local languages, in Hindi, in Bangla, in Kannada. I mean, you name it. We actually rolled it out. For the head office, head office is always a privileged location. We do have something called Wellbeing Wednesdays. Again, Sudeep also kind of referred to something like this, but we have it every Wednesday. Basically, we call it Wellbeing Wednesday, in which we pick up a topic which is relevant, to employees, which they currently grapple with. I'll give you a very simple example. Last week, we had a fantastic talk about how to deal with the stress of raising a teenager. So this is something that, we're not prepared for. All of us were parents for the first time. We don't know how to deal with a teenager at home. It gives us stress, right?
That's
and
good.
Actually had a very dedicated workshop for that, and it was a big hit. So I'm planning to do a repeat of that. We've had Zumba classes, we've had meditation classes, so basically you got to cater out and customize to the needs of your current workforce, the millennials and the older ones, basically keep that balance.
Well, thanks, Sakshi, for that. And I think it was really a pleasure listening to both of you on these facets of employee well-being. And as we are coming to the end of the session, I would just want to spend a little bit of time on how do you see the future of employee well-being, and in particular, when we say that the companies have to move from employee engagement to focus more on employee experience. And how do you really see the well-being getting stitched into this entire employee experience? So I would just go to, maybe I can start with you, Sakshi, because you've been on the ball, and then I can move, and then I can go to Sudeep after that.
Sure, Rishi. To me, this is extremely important because employees are at the core of what you do. If you want to be an employer of choice, which you compete for aggressively on campuses, in the market, in the talent market, you also got to take care of your employees. You can't be just bringing people in with a promise and not taking care of them. So to me, this is extremely central to your employee value proposition. Well-being is, there is a reason for which, well-being is on the top of the charts of every CHRO right now. It is very much to do with your employer brand, with your value proposition.
Sure.
So to me, it is extremely central, and there are tremendous benefits of looking at it holistically. and not just in a linear way or in a unidimensional way.
Great. Sudeep, what's your take?
Yeah, I think we spoke about this earlier about how the journey has been, right? And the fact that this became important some time ago. It's kind of getting more and more integrated with the overall people agenda. The way I see it is the true measure of success is when we don't necessarily need forums like this to even have a conversation about it. Ideally, a few years down the line, this should become a hygiene factor. It should be so embedded in our ways of working, in our business strategy, in our people strategy, that it should be taken as a matter of fact by most HR professionals, whether it be with larger firms or smaller firms or more progressive ones or less progressive ones. It doesn't matter. So I think that's really, and I do see it going in that direction because like we've been discussing, health and well-being is pretty much on the priority list for everyone. I think we've articulated the business case relatively well. And, there are some companies which are doing a lot more. Maybe there are some organizations which are doing a little lesser. But I think over a period of time, we'll get to a level playing field. And this will be a hygiene factor and no longer a specific and separate
differentiator.
And I think that's really the direction in which I see this going over a period of time.
Well, thanks, Sudeep. Thanks for that response. And well, as the session draws to a close, I would really want to thank both Sakshi and Sudeep for sharing some very progressive practices, some of the processes that they used, and some of the insights that they shared with all of us on the forum here. And I would really urge. I would also thank the participants. And the recording of this session will be available for the next 30 days. So if any of your colleagues would have missed out a chance to look at this, request them to watch it because it really has some tremendous amount of insights on how two of the best companies in the world are actually working on the topic of employees' well-being. And as we are, I'm taking away from this particular session is that while companies are focusing on it, I think it will only become better from here. And it will rather become not really employee engagement, but actually it will become some kind of an employee experience to go forward with. So thank you all once again, and see you all soon, and goodbye.